The question was barely louder than the rustle of leaves, yet it struck him like a sudden storm. On a cold afternoon bench, surrounded by strangers who pretended not to see, a one-legged girl stood waiting for an answer that could either reopen an old wound or quietly change her life forever. If you believe that kindness still matters in a world that often looks away, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Small actions can spread powerful compassion. The park was filled with the muted colors of late autumn, trees stripped nearly bare, the sky stretched thin and gray like an exhausted breath. Daniel Harper sat on a wooden bench near the playground, his coat pulled tight, his hands wrapped around a paper cup of cooling coffee. At 38, he looked older than his years, not because of wrinkles, but because grief had a way of settling into the bones. He was a single father now, something he had never imagined he would be. 3 years earlier, his wife had died suddenly from a heart condition, leaving him alone to raise their 7-year-old son, Noah. Every day since had felt like walking forward while constantly glancing backward at a life that no longer existed. Noah was nearby, carefully pushing toy cars along the edge of the sandbox, his small brow furrowed in deep concentration. Daniel watched him with the quiet vigilance of a parent who feared that if he looked away for even a second, something precious might vanish. Public places were hard. He always felt exposed, like the world could see his exhaustion, his uncertainty, his constant worry about whether he was doing enough or doing it right. That was when he noticed her. She stood a few steps away from the bench, hesitating. She couldn't have been more than 15 or 16. Her hair was tied back loosely, strands escaping and fluttering in the wind. She balanced on a pair of crutches, her movements careful, practiced. One leg of her jeans hung empty, pinned neatly back, unmistakably absent beneath the knee. People passed by her without meeting her eyes, some glancing too quickly, others staring too long, then looking away as if embarrassed by their own curiosity. Daniel had seen that look before. It was the same look people gave him when they learned his wife was gone. A mix of pity and discomfort, as though pain were contagious. The girl's shoulders were tense, as if she were bracing herself. She seemed to gather courage from somewhere deep inside before shifting her weight and stepping closer to the bench. Daniel sensed her presence before she spoke, the way humans sometimes feel a change in the air. He looked up, surprised, and met her eyes. They were wide and cautious, carrying a vulnerability that made his chest tighten. She asked if she could sit there. The words themselves were simple, but the unspoken weight behind them was heavy. It wasn't just about a bench. It was about permission, about whether she was welcome in a space where people usually pretended she didn't exist. Daniel's first instinct was hesitation, not because he didn't want her there, but because life had taught him to be careful. As a single father, he was constantly aware of how things might look, how easily misunderstandings could arise. For a brief moment, uncertainty flickered across his face. The girl saw it. Her grip on the crutches tightened, her expression closing slightly, as if she were already preparing for rejection. In that pause, Daniel's mind traveled back through years of quiet struggles. He remembered hospital waiting rooms that smelled of antiseptic and fear, nights spent holding his wife's hand while machines beeped steadily, pretending everything would be okay when he knew it wouldn't. He remembered learning how invisible pain could be, how people avoided sitting next to him after the funeral, unsure of what to say, afraid of saying the wrong thing. Loneliness, he had learned, wasn't always about being alone. Sometimes it was about being surrounded by people who didn't know how to see you. He looked at the girl again, really looked at her, and saw not her missing leg but the familiar shape of someone carrying more than her share of hardship. Something softened in him. He shifted slightly, making space on the bench, and nodded. The relief that washed over her face was immediate and overwhelming. She moved carefully, positioning her crutches against the bench and lowering herself down with controlled effort. Once seated, she let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for a long time. Her hands trembled faintly as she adjusted herself, then rested in her lap. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The silence felt safe. Daniel returned his gaze to Noah, who was now lining up his cars in a precise row, completely absorbed. The girl followed his eyes, a faint, tentative smile touching her lips. There was something about watching a child play that softened the edges of pain, reminding people of simpler truths. Minutes passed. The sounds of the park filled the space between them, distant laughter, the creak of swings, the crunch of footsteps on gravel. Slowly, the tension in the girl's posture eased. She no longer looked like she was ready to flee at the slightest sign of discomfort. Daniel felt an unexpected sense of calm settle over him. It surprised him how natural it felt to share the bench, the moment, with a stranger. It reminded him that connection didn't always require words, that sometimes simply allowing someone to exist beside you was an act of kindness powerful enough to change a day. Eventually, the girl shifted slightly, glancing at him. There was curiosity there now, mixed with caution. She seemed to be debating whether to speak again. Daniel sensed it and turned toward her, offering a gentle, encouraging look. She shared, in a halting way, that she had lost her leg in an accident 2 years earlier. A drunk driver, a rainy night, a moment that split her life into before and after. She talked about learning to walk again, about the stairs at school, about friends who slowly stopped calling because they didn't know how to include her anymore. Her words came out carefully, as if she had learned to ration her pain, revealing it only when necessary. Daniel listened without interrupting, without rushing to fix anything. He knew better than that. When his wife died, people had flooded him with advice and platitudes, all well-meaning, all useless. What he had needed most back then was exactly this, someone willing to listen without judgment or discomfort. He told her about Noah, about raising a child alone, about the nights when the house felt too quiet, and the mornings when he wondered how he would find the strength to keep going. He admitted that some days he felt like he was failing, that he worried his son would grow up feeling the absence of a mother in ways he couldn't fill. The girl listened with the same intensity he had given her, nodding slowly, her eyes thoughtful. It was clear she understood, more than most people her age should have. Loss had matured her in ways that weren't fair. As they talked, something subtle but profound began to shift. The bench no longer felt like a random meeting place. It felt like a small island of understanding in a sea of indifference. Two strangers, bound briefly by shared vulnerability, were reminding each other that brokenness did not mean uselessness, and loneliness did not have to be permanent. Noah eventually wandered over, clutching a leaf he had deemed especially important. Daniel introduced him, and the boy studied the girl's crutches with open curiosity, not judgment. He asked simple questions, the kind children ask before the world teaches them to be afraid of difference. The girl answered honestly, smiling more freely now, her earlier tension melting away. Daniel watched the interaction with a lump in his throat. He realized that this was the world he wanted for his son, one where kindness came naturally, where people weren't defined by what they lacked. In that moment, he understood that saying yes to a seat on a bench was also saying yes to the kind of example he wanted to set. Time moved quietly. The sky grew darker, the air colder. Eventually, the girl prepared to leave. She gathered her crutches, her movements confident now, her posture straighter than before. Before standing, she paused, her eyes shining with unshed tears. She told Daniel that most days she felt invisible, that people either avoided her or treated her like she was fragile, like she might shatter if touched by real life. Sitting on that bench, being treated like a normal person, being listened to without pity, had meant more to her than he could know. She said it had reminded her that she still belonged in the world. Daniel felt his own eyes sting. He wanted to tell her that she had done the same for him, that she had reminded him he wasn't alone in his struggles, that his pain didn't disqualify him from connection. Instead, he simply thanked her for trusting him with her story. As she walked away, carefully but confidently, Daniel felt a warmth spread through his chest that he hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't happiness exactly, but it was close. It was the quiet knowledge that even in a life shaped by loss, moments of grace were still possible. He sat there long after she was gone, watching Noah chase falling leaves, thinking about how small choices could ripple outward in ways unseen. A simple yes, offered without hesitation, had turned an ordinary afternoon into something unforgettable. Before this story ends, take a moment to comment below with a single word that describes how it made you feel. Your words might help someone else feel less alone. As the sun dipped below the trees and Daniel finally gathered his things to go home, he carried with him a renewed sense of purpose. He knew the road ahead would still be hard. There would still be lonely nights and uncertain days. But he also knew that kindness, even in its simplest form, could cut through despair like light through clouds. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the power of empathy and second chances, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps spread stories that remind us all to see each other, to make space on the bench, and to say yes when kindness quietly asks for a place to sit.